If you have been curious to learn how food impacts your unique body, your gut health, your energy levels, your inflammation, your weight, your hormones, then this episode is for you. I am so honored and excited to be joined today by Christina Kerp, who is a functional nutrition therapy practitioner. She's a blogger, she's a chef, she's a cook, she's a mom, and you can find her at castawaykitchen.com and on Instagram. And she's just an all-around amazing woman who is on a mission to help other women and men just learn how to nourish their body with whole foods in a way that their body needs. And so you're going to learn all about elimination protocols, the reason why you should do them, the reason why certain foods are good and not so good for you, certain ones, how food impacts your body, your hormones, your adrenals, and so much more. So again, if you have been wondering how to really go about experimenting on your body, how to learn how food can uniquely impact your body, then this episode is for you. So make sure you listen in, share this episode with someone, grab all her resources. And of course, this week, I want to remind you that I am doing my free Conquer Your Cravings challenge. Now, this is a space where you can learn how and why you have been craving certain foods. And even some of the things that Christina talked about today around hormones and how certain foods impact your body, those are some of the sources of cravings, right? And so be sure to join this free challenge as I'm doing it. And just get supported in really conquering your cravings this week. So go to madewell345.com/conquer your cravings or check out the show notes. And I hope to see you there. All right, enjoy the episode. You're listening to the More Than Your Weight podcast, and I am your host, Brianna Wilkerson. You know, for over half my life, I had to really pay attention to my relationship with food, my body, and myself. As a young girl, I started to find my worth in my weight and my work, and started to define my beauty and my body and my value through how I looked and how other people saw me. That led to disordered ways of eating, of exercising, and really just a poor relationship with my body and myself. And then when I started to finally see that my worth was not in my weight, it was not in how I looked, and it was not in what people thought of me, that's when I found breakthrough and freedom. And ever since, it's been my mission to help other women do the same. I am on a mission to see other women find peace with food, feel confident in their bodies again, and develop a healthy lifestyle that's more than about what they weigh. Now, weight loss is not necessarily a bad thing, but I do think when we are approaching it from a place of value or a place of trying to find our worth in it, that's when it can really trip us up. So I want you to find peace with food, to find your version of food freedom, your version of body confidence and love, and a healthy lifestyle that is about so much more than what the scale says. So this podcast is going to help you do that. You're going to find solo episodes, guest interviews, all designed to really speak from the heart, give you some new ways of thinking and acting so that you can start to also believe and walk in the truth that you are more than your weight. And from time to time, I'll throw in an essential oils episode because I'm also a lover of essential oils. So I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so honored to be a part of this journey with you. So please, before you get into the interview or the podcast or leave, I want to make sure you do a couple things. Make sure you join my free Facebook group, the More Than Your Weight Facebook community. This is a women's community designed to support you in really unpacking these episodes. I also host free trainings, free challenges to really kind of support you more in this journey. Also, make sure you subscribe to the podcast, rate and review, but also subscribe to my weekly newsletter so you'll never miss a podcast episode. You can find all the links for that in the show notes. So make sure after you listen that you go do those things. Okay? So excited for this episode and so excited to journey with you. All right, enjoy. Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Today, I am really excited to have Christina on from the Castaway Kitchen, and she is just amazing. How did we meet? I think your sister was doing the summit, and then I got on your podcast. So anyways, I'm just so excited for you to talk to us today about a topic that I think a lot of people, elimination diets, autoimmune protocol, all that. A lot of people are familiar with, but they kind of don't quite understand or even don't understand what the purpose is behind them. So I just really want you to share with us about that, but also you're a meal planning guru. Like I look at your photos and I'm like, my goodness, I just want to eat the photo. And so, just talk to us a little bit about your journey and so forth. So thanks for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm so happy to be here. It's been great. I've had you on my podcast twice, and I always love hanging
Yeah.
out with you. So I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. Yeah, guys,
And
go listen
yes,
to the Body Wise podcast if you haven't done that yet.
yeah, it's great. And my sister is how we got connected, which is awesome. And I
Mm-hmm.
love what you do and how involved you are within that Whole 30 community. And that
Mm-hmm.
was definitely my start. I mean, like I say, Whole 30 is a great catalyst, as I think it is for so many of us, into realizing the connection of food and how we feel. And kind of that intro into, like, I guess, real food or whole food, right, living. But yeah, I have autoimmune disease. I have well, one diagnosed, a skin condition, hidradenitis suppurativa, but I'm fairly certain I have other ones that aren't diagnosed. But at this point, it doesn't matter because I have them under control. Um, and for me, taking that, like, food elimination protocols are really truly almost like medical. Like, it's about very serious reactions or or symptoms that I correlate to food. And I think a lot of times people don't realize that some pretty chronic and common but yet not normal symptoms are related to what we eat. Things like postnasal drip, psoriasis, eczema, heartburn, joint pain, even things like tachycardia, like heart palpitations, migraines, that can all be related to diet. And so elimination protocols are these tools to help us learn what what foods, if any, are triggering these kind of symptoms. And so Whole 30 is a type of elimination protocol. Then there's more specific ones like the autoimmune protocol, like a low histamine diet, low FODMAP, which is more to do with, like, um, gut stuff and, like, gut infections or dysbiosis. And that's really where I found my niche, because on a personal level, my own story of figuring out how food affected my health issues. But then, as a chef, someone that loves food, I'm like, well, I still want it to taste good and look good, and you have to be able to enjoy food. And so that's what I've kind of built my business on, creating food that tastes good and is good for you, and helping people make those connections for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, again, I mean, all your food is just delicious. I love getting your emails and just like a new, your new recipe and all that. And it's just, I just think it's what you're doing. And I think you just mentioned this, is that you're making it very clear that you can eat nutritiously for your body, whatever goals
Mhm,
you have, and it tastes good. Because I think
mhm,
that's the common misconception. People feel like, okay, if I start eating healthy, everything that tastes good, I'll just never eat. And I
right.
remember a family member said that one time, and I was just like so almost offended. I was like, I'm like, everything I eat is so good, but
Right.
it's just the mentality around it that we've just all been brainwashed to believe.
We have, and I remember I did so many diets growing up because I've struggled with my weight since I was, like, a kid. And my mom, who was this great cook, and I love to cook, but then we'd go on, like, diets and eat, like, on, like, plain chicken and, like, lettuce, like, with, like, no dressing. And it was sad. And then when you realize that that's not what eating healthy really is. It's not food that tastes like cardboard. It's not food without seasoning. It can be really fun. And I think particularly right now, there's a really big push against, like, programs like Whole 30 or elimination protocols or diets in general. And I get it. I'm not someone who's, like, super pro diet. Like, I'm not big into calorie restrictions or unsustainable, like, um anything, actually, because I feel like, and you talk about this a lot, like, the whole point of all this healthy living stuff is to be sustainable. So whether it's weight loss or health benefits, that they're not just temporary, that they're lasting, right? And so for that, it has to be a lifestyle change, not just a short-term diet. But now there's this big push against, like, eating healthy. Oh, if you don't eat gluten or if you give up any foods, it's like you're on a diet, and it's diet culture, and it's restricted, whatever. And I part of me, I see those posts, and I understand where people are getting at, because there is a lot of disordered eating issues in the world. But then I think about myself and a lot of people, like, who change their life completely from being on a bunch of medications or being in chronic pain or being chronically fatigued to having energy, to feeling good in their body, to, like, literally feeling like they're living for the first time. And I'm just like, I think that I feel very, very passionate about food as medicine and food as the counter, like, the cornerstone of a vibrant lifestyle. And I don't miss pizza, no, because I get to live my life in pain free, and it's worth it. you know?
Yeah, no, and I totally agree. Like, I think there's a time and place for every sort of view or modality towards eating. And I personally, similar to you, like, it was the whole, I mean, I had been on my health journey, I had lost a lot of weight, sustained it, whatever, but it's when I did the Whole 30 that's actually, I was like, I need to be a coach. The reason why is because I could eat nutritious whole foods not feel deprived and actually feel very empowered, and
Right.
found all these foods delicious. And then I realized after the 30 or whatever days I did, oh my gosh, I don't have gas anymore. Oh my gosh, I don't have a headache. Like I just realized that this food was, I didn't realize that food was causing me all these other things that for me wasn't necessarily like life threatening or life debilitating, but it was just inconvenient. And
Mm-hmm.
so I totally agree. I think there's a time and place for it. Now, if we're just approaching these elimination diets or all these other things from a place of, I just want to fix my body and we're not really dealing with the deeper root issue, that's something else. But like for you,
That's
you're
something
right.
else.
Like it saved you, it saved many people.
Many people.
And so, yeah, so I want you to tell us a little bit about it. So maybe those who are listening, maybe they're new to it, but don't quite understand it. So when we're talking about an elimination diet, what is that?
Mm-hmm. So elimination diets particularly is because you're eliminating a lot of foods. For example, I mean, let's say Whole30, right? Whole30 is an elimination diet because you're eliminating grains and grains and gluten and dairy and sweeteners and a lot of processed foods. The autoimmune protocol is an elimination diet that specifically eliminates foods that are high in anti-nutrients, or that are compounds that can just be irritating to the gut, or or just bad for the immune system. So you also eliminate things like nuts and seeds and eggs, like common allergens, soy, corn, seed-based spices, nightshades, tomatoes, potatoes, eggplant, peppers, things that are, let's say, would be allowed on a Whole30 because they're vegetables. They're not inherently bad. They're just bad for some people. Um, and for those listening, being like, "There's no way that tomatoes going to be bad for you." I cannot eat tomatoes. Like, I when I learned that, I was like, "What?" Like, it took me because I did a lot of Whole30s and I felt better, but not all the way great. And it was because I have an intolerance to nightshades. It's one of my biggest autoimmune triggers. So anyway, so that's what elimination protocols are. You eliminate these foods, and then after a certain amount of time, usually you wait until you feel better or your symptoms are gone or mostly gone, and then you add the foods back in one at a time. And that's a really important part of trying the foods and adding foods back in, because they are not meant, you're not meant to be on a Whole30 forever. You're not meant to be on the autoimmune protocol forever. You're supposed to give the body a chance to heal, and then you do that. The beauty of elimination protocols, the way you really learn like about yourself, is when you reintroduce foods and say, okay, well, chocolate's good and coffee's safe, and eggs are fine, but tomatoes, I had a flare, my joints got swollen, or I had loose stools, or I got a migraine. No tomatoes. And then, okay, let's try something else. Potato. Oh, same thing, bad reaction to potatoes. So potatoes are out now. Then you move on to something else. And so it's very tedious process, but it does work, and it's one of my favorite tools because you cannot always test for these food intolerances. It's not the same thing as an allergy. It's not a true allergy. It's an intolerance. It's an autoimmune reaction, but not in like a histamine way. It's like an inflammatory reaction. So I find that elimination diets like the autoimmune protocol are really the gold standard for figuring out these food intolerances versus just, oh, finger break, especially the pinner test and some of these at-home ones. They're not very in depth. There is one test called the MRT test, which does look at inflammatory responses to food, and that can get you a little bit closer, but there's still so many false positives and false negatives on food tests. I've never had one that reflects my actual food intolerances. Like, they never show nightshades and things like that. So that's the point. It's like essentially a food intolerance, a food elimination protocol is, it's kind of like doing a blood test for food allergies or for things that you react to, but like 100% the way to do it, and also harder, but I think worth it. I don't know. I'm not selling it, but I'm telling you,
Yeah.
it's not easy, but I think it's worth it.
No, I mean, I think what you're hitting at is the idea that this is ultimately, at the end of the day, we should want to be healthier and allow our
Right.
bodies to function the way they're functioning. And diets don't always get at that. They might allow us to, hit a certain, goal. But what an autoimmune protocol or elimination protocol will help us do is actually figure out what our body needs. And that's what we need to figure out, because how you eat might be different than how I eat. And that's okay,
100%.
but we're supporting our individual bodies. And so, you talked a lot about histamine and inflammatory. And obviously on this podcast, we talk about sustainable weight loss. And I think weight is something that's it is important, but it's not the only thing that's important. All these other things that you're talking about is actually even more important. So talk to us a little bit about what you meant by like foods that are inflammatory or produce a histamine response.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of foods that we that like, again, they don't, I mean, there's foods that we all know are kind of like probably inflammatory to everybody, things like processed foods and like canola oil and, like if you eat a Twinkie, it's not doing anything. There's no nutritional value there. It's just going to spike your blood sugar, things like that. Obviously, those are the given. But then there's a lot of foods that, like you mentioned, bio-individuality, right? There's foods that like one person's poison is another person's superfood. So, um, for example, a lot of people, and even people, let's say, who do a Whole30 will be like, well, I did the Whole30, but I felt worse. I was eating all this like avocado and spinach and bananas and sweet potato, and just strawberries and just eating so healthy, but I felt horrible. Well, spinach, strawberries, bananas, and avocado are all very high histamine foods. I am fine with this histamine. I break down histamine fine because I don't have histamine intolerance. But there are people usually who have history of like hives or asthma, a lot of allergies, who their body produces too much histamine, or doesn't break it down fast enough, and then they eat foods that are high in histamine, and then boom, they have these like really strong histamine symptoms. But food is a major contributor to those symptoms, but they don't know it, right? Because no one talks about that. And so it's not that I live off avocado because I don't have histamine issues, and for my autoimmune issues, avocado works fine. And so it's about knowing what's your poison, essentially. So, there's different foods that cause different reactions, like the histamine response, and histamine also works on a bucket if that kind of effect. So, oftentimes, and let me be clear, everyone has a histamine response. We all have it in our body. It's part of our immune system. It's really important. The reason why some people develop histamine intolerance is because usually they have mast cell activation syndrome, or they have like some gut issues or or hypothyroid, something that's driving the histamine intolerance. And then they build up too much histamine in their system and their body isn't able to break it down fast enough. And essentially then they have these symptoms, right? But like you and I, Brianna, who like don't have histamine intolerance, like we can eat high histamine foods and deal with with regular seasonal allergies, but our body breaks down histamine in real time or like in an adequate pace. So eating avocado doesn't give us a hive. Um, and then an autoimmune response is essentially a food that, like certain foods, depending, and everyone's different, that you eat a food and it, gets into your bloodstream, because the food we eat does get into our bloodstream. Not all of it, but there's compounds of the food we eat. So there's certain proteins of it or molecules of the food. And that's how nutrients get to different parts of our body, not just through absorption in the gut, but certain compounds of food are actually like made to permeate gut lining. And but for some of us with autoimmune disease, these certain compounds set off an autoimmune response. So if you have Hashimoto's, this autoimmune response means that when you eat that food and it impacts your immune system, that your immune system will attack your thyroid. If you have rheumatoid arthritis, this food will set off an immune response that attacks your joints. If you have MS, the immune response will attack your nerves. And so that's the correlation, and that's the correlation between like the foods you eat and then having a response. But the difficult thing is that there is no manual. I mean, there is the autoimmune protocol, right? But that eliminates a ton of foods. And just because it eliminates these foods doesn't mean that the foods are inherently bad. It's just you have to start somewhere. So you take everything that could possibly, maybe it's like take it out and then you learn from there. And so for one person, it could be eggs and gluten and dairy. For another person, it could be soy, corn, peanuts, etc. But it seems crazy, right? You're like, what do you mean? Like I eat food and then it'll make my joints swell. But we're made up of our food. Literally, the food we eat makes up ourselves. So I feel like it's not that much of a stretch,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I love what you just said though at the, that there's no manual, as you were saying,
Right.
bio-individuality. There's no and I think when we are approaching like any diet or any, black and white thing, we actually want a manual that will fit us. But the manual is kind of general, like this generally will work with someone who has autoimmune conditions or autoimmune disease, but you need to try it for yourself and then figure out which one of those work with you or not. So we have to be willing to go on that experimentation journey for ourselves. And
Right.
I would love for you to share a little bit about this, because I think what people don't recognize is, a lot of women that I meet that, maybe listening are kind of older. So they, they're really concerned about their hormones because their hormones are shifting. And obviously, ladies, your hormones is way more than estrogen and progesterone. It's so much. You have a lot in your body that do a lot of things. But how does what we eat affect our hormone and our endocrine system?
So, very like our sex hormones specifically, like estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone, are made from saturated fats that we eat. So if we don't eat those fats, or enough of those fats, we don't make enough of those hormones. And then in other nutrients, like different kinds of minerals specifically are tied to, or are needed, let's say, for different parts of our endocrine system. Like our adrenals really like copper. Our thyroid really likes iodine. So in general, just nutrient density, right? Lots of really good quality proteins, lots of leafy greens, colorful veggies, really important for that. And so what's interesting when it comes to, it's multifaceted, right? So blood sugar regulation is a huge component of hormone health. And the reason being is that insulin which is also a hormone, is like this mob boss of the endocrine system. And when we have a lot of blood sugar dysregulation, especially as we get into like perimenopausal and menopausal, and perimenopause, it puts a stress on our adrenals, right? Because as our essentially sex organs stop producing the main production of our sex hormones, our adrenals actually take over. So now, other than your fight or flight response, your adrenals also in charge of producing estrogen and testosterone and progesterone in less quantities, but that's what it's going to do now. So blood sugar regulations are really big, really important, because if your adrenals are too busy, pumping out cortisol because your blood sugar is all over the place, you're going to have a hard time. You're going to essentially end up with this depletion, where it's a secondary function. Like, even let's say women of reproductive age, why do you think women lose their cycles when they don't eat enough, right? Because your body's like, whoa, you can't have, we have other things to do. We got to keep you alive, but we're going to, you're not going to have babies right now. So what we eat has a big, and stress. So blood sugar regulation, diet, and stress. It's like the three-legged stool of like hormone health. So one, nutrient density, making sure you're eating plenty of protein, adequate amounts of healthy fats, and lots of like micronutrients, to make sure that you're giving all the different parts of the endocrine system the nutrients that they need, so they can, the cofactors, the functions, so your hormones can do what they need to do. The second thing, you have to make sure blood sugar regulation, and that means not necessarily if you go super low carb, but just make sure that you're eating, your blood sugar is not dipping too low or spiking too high. So maybe avoid naked carbs, which is essentially like, if you're going to have some sweet potato, put some ghee on it. If you're gonna, have some plantain chips, have it with some mashed avocado instead of like just, straight up. So that way it digests a little bit slower, doesn't spike your blood sugar. And then stress is another big one. Like when you're really stressed out, again, it's going to impair your blood sugar regulation. It's actually going to impair your digestion. So you're not going to digest your food properly, and then you're not going to absorb your nutrients properly. But again, an extended or chronic cortisol, chronic cortisol is essentially going to get to the point where your adrenals are going to be like, okay, well, we can't make other things, so we're just going to or it'll actually pull from your head. There's this phenomenon called pregnenolone steal, where essentially you can pull from your sex hormones to fuel that fight or flight response. So there's the school of thought that as you move into perimenopause or postmenopausal, women do better with a lower carb, higher fat approach. Because it just, again, tends to help, more saturated fat. You're going to create more hormones. It's going to be really easy on your adrenals. And I know it's hard because there tends to be that kind of weight gain or harder time getting weight off, but do not calorie restrict. Your endocrine system does not like being hungry. It will slow down your metabolism.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think, it's interesting. I had an older friend who was thinking in the menopause phase, and she was just, it's not that she eats less, she's just like what you're saying, she changed how much she ate of one thing. So she's like, oh, I probably shouldn't have even as much fruit or like all this, all these other things. So she's like, because my body just doesn't metabolize things the same way. It's just different. But she's like, I'm going to go have some, what you're saying, some avocado or some olives and all those things. So I think that's just very important, because a lot of women enter this phase and, their metabolism does change, their hormones do change, but it's not the worst thing. What you could do is actually be this age and go on a diet and go, your body's just like, it needs nutrients. Otherwise it's going to be stressed, and it's going to do what you're saying. It's going to pull from all the other things, and, which causes an array of symptoms. We're often trying to, treat the hot flashes or treat the night sweats or, treat all these
dry skin.
things.
Yeah, all those things, hair falling out. I mean,
Yeah.
that's all like symptoms of the nutrient deficiencies. And it's interesting what you said about not metabolizing certain foods. So so as we age, also our digestive our stomach acid kind of dwindles, our gastric juices weaken a bit, and so it makes it a little harder sometimes to break down certain foods. So slowing down to eat, making sure you're chewing your food properly, maybe adding a digestive enzyme, things like that all become really important.
So good. My goodness. I'm like writing notes ferociously over here. Man, your NT, you know a lot, but I know like, NTP probably helped too. But so tell us a little bit more about, like you have this amazing blog, and tell us a little bit more about what you do in your blog and your business, and, how people can get in touch with you.
Yeah. So again, I was a restaurant chef, and then I started on my own health journey because I was, mom, I was postpartum. I was just finished breastfeeding my baby. He was 2 years old, and I felt like, oh my God, I'm not gonna make it to 40. It was just a really like scary time where, you have young kids and you just had a baby. You want to be like, I hadn't started my health journey. So I literally went through the postpartum phase, still probably doing a lot of wrong things, eating my trigger food. So my body was inflamed, but all of that essentially that sheer desire to be able to longevity, feel good, like live my life and raise my kids and have the energy to do all the things sparked my business because I knew the food was the key, and I knew that food, there was a connection there. And when I started creating the recipes, and then people were like, oh man, this is good, or this is helping me. And so I kept sharing AIP and Whole30 and paleo recipes. But as I healed more and more, and I started seeing other people benefit from my food, I wanted to learn why. So I went back to school. I got my NTP certification. And I'm kind of like a lifelong scholar of sorts. Like I love learning. I'm always reading the new books and reading research papers and just always absorbing more information. I work for a functional medicine doctor, Dr. Becky Campbell, in her practice. And she's a histamine and thyroid expert. So I learned a lot from her, and I'm just kind of always geeking out about this stuff, right? It blows my mind. I can never get tired of learning about just how food affects the body. And so I share a lot about that on my website, thecastawaykitchen.com, which has, it's an archive of resources, from blog posts that chronicle my personal journey to articles I've written about keto or blood sugar regulation or endocrine health. And of course, hundreds of free recipes. And my niche tends to be, what I really try to give people is options. So I have egg-free recipes. I have nut-free recipes. I have dairy-free recipes. All my recipes are gluten-free, nightshade-free recipes. I tend to really be like, you figured out if food doesn't work for you, that's okay. Come to my house. I got food for you. Like I want to make sure everyone gets fed and feeds them and gets to enjoy the food they eat, because like my kind of like my slogan is like, love the food that loves you back. Right. So yeah, I have the blog. I wrote 2 cookbooks, Made Whole and then Made Whole, Made Simple. And they both have massive amounts of information, and all the recipes are gluten-free, nightshade-free, dairy-free, nut-free, all the frees, but delicious. And then I do group coaching, which I just launched. I'm doing my first group coach, Better Together, which helps people through an elimination protocol. Because a lot of people tell me, Christina, I know it's what I have to do, but every time I start, I fail. And I know you see this with your clients too, Brianna. Like, I'm sure, people just, it's doing it alone is hard. It can be scary. You have a million questions. You go to the grocery store, you're reading labels, and you're kind of like, I don't know. You get kind of paralyzed with all the, is this right? Is this wrong? And so I decided to, I'm just going to help people do it. So now I get a group of people a few times a year and helping them through the elimination protocols and customizing it. Because people come to me for mostly AIP, but then I'm reading their paperwork and I'm like, you know what? You don't need AIP. You need low histamine, or you need this. So I'm really diving into that work right now. And yeah, just always finding new ways to support women mostly, but I help men too, through their health journey. Because I feel like it's the key. It's like, as we live in this modern world and people are busier and they're more stressed out, and we're spending more time on the screen and everyone's on social media and people are spending less time outside, and the world like our environment becomes more toxic. Like, we're just going to keep seeing more and more of this, like more people with chronic illness, more people with autoimmune issues. I'm seeing it now even more, like even from 5 years ago, where I only saw women in their 30s and 40s and 50s. Now in the practice, we're seeing teenagers, girls just started high school, college, dealing with severe chronic illness and autoimmune issues. And I hope that the Western conventional medicine, that more doctors are opening up their practices and their minds to understanding that medicine, life-saving medicine, 100% has its place, but we need to look at diet.
Yeah.
Like food and lifestyle choices have to be a part of everybody's care plan. Everybody.
Right. Yeah. No, I completely agree. Yeah, I mean, you have so many resources. So ladies, or if guys are listening to, definitely go check out the Castaway Kitchen. And before we go, I would love for you to share where else we can find you on social. But then I would just love for you to share why you called it the Castaway Kitchen.
Okay. So you can find me anywhere online at the Castaway Kitchen. I'm really active on Facebook and Instagram. Although I am taking March off, trying to lead by example with my coaching group of so I am taking this month off social media. I have things scheduled to post, but I am taking a month off. But I post recipes and cooking videos, and I'm on TikTok now. Help me. I feel old, but I'm on there.
Help me.
Oh gosh. I'm like the oldest person on the app, I swear. But so I'm online and I share on a YouTube channel and my podcast also, because I do videos for my podcast and add captions. So people need captions, they're on there as well. But so at the Castaway Kitchen, anywhere, you can find me. And okay, I love the story behind the name because it's very personal to me. My logo is also, it's a paper boat. It's a little boat, and I'm Cuban, Cuban American. I'm first generation American. Both my parents were born in Cuba and lived through communism and escaped communism and came to America. In boats, not rafts. And my dad came in the Mariel. My mom came in the Mariel boat. My dad came before that. But barquito de papel, which is paper boat in Spanish, was this lullaby my mom used to always sing me as a kid, and it's kind of this little political like lullaby against like the revolution. But when I started my blog, we were living in Hawaii. My husband's in the Navy; he's active duty, and we move every 3 years. And we were living in a hotel room in Hawaii with like all, kind of feeling like I felt like castaway. I felt like a shipwreck on this island. All of a sudden with my kid, and we're living in this hotel room, my kid, my dog, my husband. And I don't know. And I kept thinking of like how interesting that I'm at this like rock bottom place in my life, and thinking of the parallels between my parents kind of like who went from an island to the US, and now I'm on this island, and I don't know. So Castaway Kitchen, Castaway just came to my mind. And I love the imagery of tying in something that represents my heritage into my logo. So the Castaway Kitchen. Yep.
Oh, it's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. No, yeah, I think, people talk about, I have 345 at the end, and they're like, is that like a Bible verse or what is it? I'm like, no, that's actually K-Man's area code. And everyone back home knew what it was. They're like, oh, 345. Right. So it's like, I love that idea of like bringing in a part of who you are, because that's a huge part, not just of who you are, but even the reason why you started this 100%. So for good. Sure. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you.
Oh, it was my pleasure being here. It's always fun talking to you.
I know. Okay, everyone, make sure you check out the show notes. I will link everything that Christina talked about, her coaching, her blog, her social, and her books. Make sure you buy her cookbooks and be sure to connect with her. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
What an amazing episode. I love Christina. I love Castaway Kitchen, and I just love all the work she's doing to really help women heal through nutritious food. So be sure to check out all her resources, everything she mentioned. And of course, make sure you join my Conquer Your Cravings challenge that is happening this week live in my Facebook group. It is a space where you can understand the source of your cravings and learn how to conquer it actually through food, such as the foods we talked about here in this episode, through mindset, through habits, and so much more. So join us. Go to madewell345.com/conqueryourcravings, or check out the show notes and sign up and join us today. There's no time that's too late this week, so join at any point this week. All right, see you there. That's it. That's another episode of the More Than Your Weight podcast. I hope that you're leaving encouraged and inspired to continue to walk in your more than your weight journey. But before you leave, I want you to know you're not alone. And I want you to really walk in that by joining my free group, the More Than Your Weight Women's Community. This is a space where you can unpack the podcast episodes, get support throughout your week. And also make sure you subscribe to my newsletter by signing up for weekly updates when podcasts come out, as well as all the other things that I'm offering in my business. And if you're not about Facebook, or even maybe you're not about email, make sure you follow me on Instagram at Madewell345 to show you the behind the scenes of my life, my business, and also to support you there. Okay, I just had a blast in this episode, and I hope that these episodes have really been just encouraging you and inspiring you to know that you are more than your weight. Okay, that's it, and I'll see you on the next one.